So this is part A of the Khudila television under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo. And this is the Baby Angel Geronimo essay, which means that we are taking a detailed factual look at the state of the United Kingdom as it is broken, and we have listed in the past the key aspects of the broken state, which is that the judiciary is corrupt, parliament is corrupt, government is corrupt, corruption is shamelessly Sarah Vanity, previously married to of the week. Today's Daily Mail is that she is actually lying and she is not telling the truth about the reason for her writing this one, which is that she says that Russell Brand will become an even worse monster she says why I fear scandal could create a bigger monster out of Russell Brand. Now, what is she saying? She's saying that Russell Brand should be allowed to carry on and he should not be held to account. Because if he is held to account, then he will become a even worse monster. How can that be? I'm going to get the piece, the actual piece that she has written on page 15, which says, no army has ever matched the massed ranks of keyboard warriors backing Brand online. I fear he may end up becoming an even bigger monster. And she is effectively another apologist. All the evidence, she is ignoring all the evidence. And she is saying he may or may not be guilty. So she is saying that Russell Brand should be allowed to carry on. She is an evil one. she's a liar. She's stealing from other people's comments and presenting those as her own. Now, we shall be, of course, taking continuous factual look Wolf is spelled WOLFF. Wolf is writing or has written second book about Rupert Murdoch. And he says that he may be the journalist not in Murdoch's employ who knows Murdoch best. So, what this Guardian kind of summary of this Wolf book is presented is under the heading Rupert Murdoch often wishes Donald Trump dead, Michael Wolff book says. Rupert Murdoch loathes Donald Trump so much that the billionaire has not just soured on him as a presidential candidate, but often wishes for his death. The author Michael Wolff writes in his eagerly awaited new book on the media mogul, the fall, end of the of Fox News and the Murdoch dynasty. I'll read that particular paragraph again. Rupert Murdoch loathes Donald Trump so much that the billionaire has not just soured on him as a presidential candidate, but often wishes for his death. The author Michael Wolff writes in his eagerly awaited new book on the media mogul, the fall, the end of Fox News, and the Murdoch dynasty. According to Wolff, Murdoch 92 has become a frothing at the mouth enemy of the 77-year-old former US president, often voicing thoughts including, this would all be solved if, and how could he still be alive? How could he? Now, he's 92 and Trump is 77. I mean, how is it possible for a 92-year-old to take seriously when he says about a 77-year-old, how could he still be alive? How could he? What an absurd equation there, or lack of equation. The fall was announced last month and will be published in the US next Tuesday. The Guardian obtained a copy. Wolff has written three tell-all books about Trump: Fire and Fury, Siege, and Landslide, and one about Murdoch, the man who owns the news. In his second Murdoch book, Wolff says he may be the journalist not in his employ who knows Murdoch best. Wolff also describes his source material as conversation specifically for this book, and often conversations that have taken place. I'll read that again because I have misread the word conversations. I've said it in singular. Wolff also describes his source material as conversations specifically for this book and other conversations that have taken place over many years. Scenes and events that I have personally witnessed or that I have recreated with the help of participants in them. After Trump entered US politics in 2015, winning the White House the following year, he, along with an increasingly extreme Republican Party, Fox News, and other properties in Murdoch's right wing media empire, formed a symbiotic relationship. But Murdoch has long been reported to have soured on Trump. A process which, according to Wolf, saw Murdoch personally endorse the Fox News call of Arizona for Joe Biden on election night in 2020 that fueled Trump's campaign of lies about voter fraud, culminating in the deadly January the 6th attack on Congress. By the beginning of this year, Wolf writes, what Murdoch adamantly didn't want was Trump. Of all the Trump's of all Trump's implacable enemies, Murdoch had become a frothing at the mouth one. His relatively calm demeanor from the early Trump presidency, where with a sigh he could dismiss him merely as a fucking idiot, had now become a churning stew of rage and recrimination. Trump's death became a Murdoch theme. We would all be better off. This would all be solved if. How could he still be alive? How could he? Have you seen him? Have you seen what he looks like? What he eats? Trump has regularly claimed to be exceptionally fit for his age, claims backed by doctors when he was in the White House. He also claims to be more mentally fit for office than Biden, his 80 years old successor, claims many observers increasingly doubt. After Trump left office, Wolf writes, Murdoch, like much of the Republican establishment, had convinced himself that Trump was finally vulnerable, that his hold on the base and on Republican politicians had weakened enough that now was the time to kill him off finally. But now, as another election year approaches, Trump is in rude political health. Notwithstanding 91 criminal charges for state and federal election subversion, retention of classified information, and harsh money payments and assorted civil cases, Trump leads the Republican primary by vast margins in national and key state polling. The overwhelming favorite to win the nomination to face Biden in another White House battle. So this is an interesting take. How could he be still alive, says Murdoch, 92, about Trump, 77. Okay, let's check this one, which has been posted at the start of this day, and the byline to someone called Nadeem Badshah on the Guardian website, which says, former Mayor of London Ken Livingstone diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. The retired 78-year-old former MP is being well cared for, his family announced. Ken Livingstone, the former Labour MP and Mayor of London, has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, his family has announced. The 78-year-old is being well cared for by his family and friends as he lives a private life in retirement, they said in a statement to the Press Association news agency. The statement said, in response to media inquiries, the Livingston family today announced that Ken Livingstone, ex-MP for Brent and former Mayor of London, has been diagnosed with and is living with Alzheimer's disease. Although a previously prominent public figure, Ken is now retired and lives a private life. He will no longer be available for any media interviews or requests and will not be responding to any media questions or inquiries. Ken is being well cared for by his family and friends, and we ask you for your understanding and to respect his privacy and that of his family. There are 944,000 people estimated to be living with dementia in the UK, according to Alzheimer's Research UK. And the diagnosis rate in England was 62% in 2022. The chief executive of the Alzheimer's Society, Kate Lee, said, we are really sorry to hear that Ken Livingstone is living with Alzheimer's disease. Our thoughts are with him and his family. We can see from the high profile individuals who have recently spoken about their dementia diagnosis, including Alistair Stewart and Fiona Phillips, amongst others, how prevalent dementia is. 1 in 3 people born in the UK today will go on to develop this devastating condition. We are grateful to Ken's family for being open about his diagnosis, which will really help increase public understanding. Having largely retreated from the public life in recent years, Livingstone was a prominent figure in politics for more than 4 decades. In 1971, he was elected to Lambeth Borough Council. He was leader of the GLC from 1981 until 1986, and a year later he was elected the member for Brent East in northwest London, where he served between 1987 and 2001. The former tech, lab technician also served 2 terms as Mayor of London from 2000 to 2008. A Labour member for more than 50 years, Livingstone was expelled from the party in 2000 after challenging Frank Dobson, the party's official candidate in the London mayoral election race. He was later readmitted to the party by Tony Blair. During his time at City Hall, he was involved with London's successful bid for the 2012 Olympic Games and in dealing with the aftermath of the 7/7 terrorist attack in 2005. Livingston was handed a 4-week suspension from office in 2006 for comparing a Jewish journalist to a concentration camp guard. The suspension was overturned in court. Livingston lost City Hall in 2008 when he was defeated by Boris Johnson, and a failed bid to return to office in 2012 marked the end of his electoral ambitions. In 2016, Ken Livingstone was suspended from the Labour Party over comments he made in a radio interview that Adolf Hitler was supporting Zionism before he went mad and ended up killing 6 million Jews. Livingstone apologized for his remarks at the time but denied that he was guilty of anti Semitism. In 2018, Livingstone announced he was resigning from the Labour Party, saying the issues around his suspension for alleged anti Semitism had become a distraction. Now, this is the piece on The Guardian as I have retrieved this one. It is posted at 0000 BST, which would be 23 hours GMT on Tuesday, 19th of September 2023. Now, this piece is an idiotic piece about Ken Livingstone because Ken Livingstone, I have named him or renamed him Ken Lying Steel Livingstone. Including the claim that the choice of the venue for the 2012 games, which was Stratford in Newham, he said that he lied about Stratford because he said that if he hadn't lied, then Stratford would not be regenerated at any time in the future. So he had to lie and make the case that Stratford is the best place, which was absolutely the wrong one. Secondly, Ken lies to Livingstone's corrupted democracy in London, in the United Kingdom, because his loss to Boris Johnson at the 2008 mayoral election in London was nothing to do with his politics, but with his lack of principle and lack of politics and lack of integrity. He lost significantly after coming across as a really aggressive, disrespectful individual who was insulting a Jewish reporter who was really the reporter that he compared with the Nazi concentration camp guard, Oliver Feingold. Oliver Feingold was working for the London Evening Standard at the time. And Feingold talked about basic Now, I spent the best part of 1981 to 1987, 88, most of the time, the weekdays, at County Hall, which was the main address for the Greater London Council, and the part of the Greater London Council was the so-called Education Committee, which was better known as the Inner London Education Authority. In those years, I did something unique. I interrupted Ken Livingstone, lying still Livingstone, on hundreds of occasions. So if we start from 1981 to 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, let's say 5 calendar years of his time at the GLC, then you can see the hundreds of events. They are not massive events, but they were events that he organized at County Hall by abusing his position as the leader of the GLC. And I have broadcast and published and written the most extensive factual details about the corrupt time that Ken Livingstone created with his so called leadership in the GLC. The whole of the GLC was a corrupt outfit, and it was dedicated, it was robbed from the people of London by Ken Livingstone, who was obsessed with the ambition to be known as the most highest profiled politician on the left, or politician generally in the United Kingdom. In order to enhance his political ego and political narcissism, Ken Livingstone corrupted the GLC. In addition to the corruption that had been already built in the GLC over its entire existence, the GLC was never democratically accountable. It was never made available to the people of London that it was supposed to be, and it wasn't even available or made available through the London boroughs, 32 London boroughs, that it was supposed to be available through. And the reason why the GLC was never democratically available as a corrector to the corruption inherent in all the 32 boroughs was because the GLC itself was corruptly controlled and corruptly seized, if you like. And this particular corruption started in May 1981, very soon after the result of the GLC election in 1981 were known, because there was a group among the Labour members of the GLC that had just been elected. The group was led by Ken Livingstone, and they staged A coup. They staged a coup against the winning leader of the GLC Labour Group, Andrew McIntosh from Haringey. They dethroned him and they put Ken Livingstone Livingstone in Andrew McIntosh's place. And it was happening right in front of me. So I decided that I would spend the best part of my time in investigating what was going on. And I did investigate. And I am the only one who did investigate what was going on under the cover of the GLC. It was a corrupt enterprise instead of the Greater London Council being engaged in holding the local boroughs accountable for the benefit of the people of each borough. And there was no strategy whatsoever. There was no democratic strategy. So remember the year, it was 1981 when the GLC Tories were lost. They lost the election, May 1981, and the election was won by the Labour Party, which was led, the Labour group on the GLC was led by Andrew McIntosh. Now, it is quite possible that if Ken Livingstone had been leading the GLC Labour group in the run up to the election, May 1981, it is most likely that the Tories would retain the control of the GLC. Because as he has shown, Ken Livingstone is a very corrupt individual. His records are overwhelmingly full of events and policies and announcements, etc., that are aligned to the idea of keeping him at the highest profile individual. So I was physically in County Hall and I was physically within actual physical distance of Ken Livingstone and the other corrupt members of the GLC. A number of the crooks on the GLC that gang. Nobody else was saying that. There were dozens of reporters, journalists attending the GLC every single day, but not one reporter, one journalist raised this question, despite the fact that all my interventions against Ken Livingstone's corruption of the GLC was happening in front of them. And the other thing that Ken Livingstone didn't like was that I was actually catching me out. For example, when he launched himself as the leader of the anti-racist year, GLC anti-racist year, I studied the contents of the leaflets, etc., that had been distributed in the run-up to the launch of the anti-racist year. So, at one of the briefings that I attended and Livingstone addressed, I asked him factual questions, and it turned out that the questions that I had asked were news to Ken Livingstone, which meant that he had not read the propaganda brochure that had been published about the very event that he was addressing the journalists about. This is typical. So he found that I was very meticulous and very detailed in my knowledge of what was going on and what I was asking and examining. My mission became the mission to uphold the implicit democratic demands and claims of the ordinary people of London, millions of millions of Londoners. Nobody else was speaking for the millions of Londoners except me. And I was doing it right in front of the other media people and directly addressing Livingston at the events that he organized. So, this is one of the biggest, longest running investigations that has taken place, and it is something that refers to everything to do with the Labour Party, everything to do with the democracy in the United Kingdom, about colonialism and racism, and the role that people in London from various backgrounds, African people, Caribbean people, people from the Asian subcontinent, and this Far Eastern people. Nobody else has spoken about that. Nobody has done the work about them, and nobody has spent the time investigating. And I did that. For example, to examine the contents of the title that was called the Caribbean Times. It is a weekly publication that had not existed until the GLC came into being under the leadership of Ken Livingstone. And it was something that suddenly hit the people mainly of the Caribbean background. And it was a weekly publication which was quite expensive, costly to publish. And it was controlled by the man that I call Riffraff Ali, corrupt to the core, Arif Ali. And this crook, Arif Ali, was given any amount of money of the GLC by Ken Livingstone Livingston. And you could see the result of that connection, the result of that arrangement, which was evident in the fact that there were, in any average issue of the Caribbean Times, 10, even 20 pictures of Ken Livingstone Livingston, or 10 or 20 mentions, prominent mentions of Ken Livingstone Livingston. And the GLC was the main theme. Now it was an absolutely empty kind of parade, something that wasn't actually happening, but it was being invented in the pages of the Caribbean Times as happening. Meaning, there were mentions of Ken Livingstone, there were mentions of the GLC, and there were implied suggestions that by their being mentioned, they were liberating the mainly Caribbean people or Caribbean community in London. That never happened. But if you look at the copies of the Caribbean Times in the library anywhere when it is available, you can see that there was a completely fantasy reality created by Ken Livingstone. Remember when this was happening? This happened long before the internet came on and the online publishing and the misinformation came on. This was happening in the first part of the 1980s. And centrally in the United Kingdom, the UK government was being led by, fronted by Margaret Thatcher at the height of her political power. And in the House of Commons, the Labour Party was completely in a demoralized position. In terms of the founding objectives and aims of the Labour Party, there was no presence of the Labour Party in the House of Parliament. So, what Ken Livingston Livingstone and his gang of criminals at the GLC did was to assume, to sabotage, and to take over the emptiness of the opposition Labour Party and make serious claims, political claims about what they were doing for the people of Britain, which is absolute rubbish. Because, for example, they started issuing statements about international relations. International relations were not the real purpose of the GLC's existence. The real purpose of the GLC's existence constitutionally was to operate as the main, let's say, negotiator between democracy and the people of the boroughs, 32 boroughs, London boroughs, which they completely abandoned. And they focused attention on the personality of Ken Livingston Livingstone, or Ken Livingston Livingstone fronted GLC. And all the members of the GLC that were loyal to Ken Livingston Livingstone were effectively rendered into zombie status. None of them had any say, and it appeared that none of them was interested in having any say as long as they got their allowances and as long as they got their career as GLC councillors. The GLC produced completely bogus outfits. For example, Paul Boateng, who was the GLC member from Brent, created a thing called the GLC Police Committee. And in the GLC Police Committee, there were the Police Committee Support Unit. But they were corrupt. They were not really engaged in holding the police to account. And you can see the result. The fact that the London police has become absent, abolished, it didn't happen by accident. While the GLC had the GLC Police Committee, it wasn't looking at the actual behavior of the police in London. Why is it important? Because this was happening. The GLC Police Committee was physically in existence during the very time when the so called Brixton riots took place. But in the actual behavior of the police committee, and especially more importantly, in the behavior of the GLC Police Committee Support Unit, no access was available to the people on the ground, the ordinary people on the ground generally, who had the contacts with the police or who had the most empirical, the maximum, the majority empirical accounts to share about what was going on with the police behavior on the ground. And so, therefore, the constitutional, legal, democratic obligations of the police in London was allowed to lapse, and the ordinary people were allowed to be sunk out of any mention. For example, in Tower Hamlets, there was a thing called the kappa. Now, say it again and you will hear it sounds like copper, like police. but it was CAPA. It was Community Alliance for Police Accountability. Now, the people who were supposed to be in the police Community Alliance for Police Accountability, first of all, were mainly white outsiders. They were not even local Tower Hamlets people. And secondly, they were racist. And thirdly, they were very ignorant about democracy and accountability. Now, remember, this was happening in the 1980s, right? 1981, 82, 83. And the reason why that particular outfit was set up was not unconnected with the fact that the GLC, after the coup fronted by Ken Livingstone Livingston, taking over the GLC control in May 1981, they encouraged people in only parts of London, not everywhere, to create bogus outfits, calling them things like the Community Alliance for Police Accountability, so that those would be used as vehicles for making money for the individuals concerned, as they did with the Kappa in Tower Hamlets. They created jobs for these races, but that's it. They didn't actually have any activity for examining the behavior of the police, let alone for holding the police to account in Tower Hamlets. Okay? So when I say that I interrupted Ken Livingstone Livingston hundreds of times, I mean about things like that. What I'm saying now, what am I saying? Whatever I'm saying now is 40 years later. I was doing that 40 years earlier, 40 years ago. London. In my capacity as the leader of the London Collective of Black Governors, LCBG, and the school concerned was in Newham. Stratford School, which became the grant maintained school that opted out of Newham Council's control, was at the center of a dispute between the head teacher and the parent governors of the school. It wasn't something, the dispute was not something that I had created, but I intervened when the dispute got going because it was without any radar, without any direction, without any focus whatsoever. So, whatever it was about education, about the community, and it wasn't about my role in the GLC. But the Guardian decided to encountered me in my action because my action is unique. I raise questions, I demand answers. Nobody else does that. Nobody else has done that in London I don't think ever. So when the Guardian, Sarah Bosley, who is no longer at the Guardian, so racistly idiotic, dishonest woman, contacted the likes of Ken Livingstone Livingston and wanted to know what he thought of me. Remember, that was 92, March 1992. He then expressed his frustration at my activities at the GLC. Now, none of the racists quoted in the Guardian piece by Sarah Bosley could find anything unethical, immoral whatsoever in my behavior, because I'm not only politically exceptionally ethical and moral, I would never want to do anything which is not 100% moral and ethical. So they couldn't find anything wrong with my morality or my ethics, and I most certainly would not take anyone's money to make a career and would not want to be a career politico. So what they found was that, according to Livingstone, nobody else was supporting me. That is what Ken Livingstone said. And he then said, so therefore we ignored him. Now, if he ignored me, how was it that nobody else was mentioned in that piece? It was me that they were mentioning, all of them. No one else was mentioned, not in that piece, not since. Now, the news that Ken Livingstone has got diagnosed as having Alzheimer's, it may be clinically a news item, but morally he has been suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia right along the beginning, from the whole period of his career. He has suffered from dementia. He has been immoral, he has been unethical, and he has been corrupt and he has been racist. Neither he nor Peter Newsom nor any of the other racists that the Guardian promoted, apparently at my expense, had ever come across anyone like me. And they would not. So instead of following up what these criminals said, the Guardian just left it there. So Catherine Vanity, which is the current name of the editor in charge, I mean, this is chief editor of the Guardian group, or she must apologize to me and go through all the items that I have been doing and publish the overdue, detailed pieces of my work, on my work, about the GLC and about the other things that I've been actively campaigning and canvassing and advocating the rights for the people of London. Now, this is not the first part. This is just a part, introduction to Ken Livingstone's news that he has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. This will be continued in other parts. Now, going back to the Catherine Sarah Vanity, what is she saying? Sarah Vanity is saying on this Daily Mail today, Wednesday, the 20th of September. She is trying her best to say that she is not defending Russell Brand, but she is. She is contradicting herself anyway, I mean, right, left, and center. Essentially, she is wrong because if it is accepted that he should be left alone and he should not be made into a bigger monster, then he will become a bigger monster. What she is saying, in effect, is that if Jimmy Seville was caught at the time he was still alive, then he would not have become the monster that he did become. That's a lie. Jimmy Savile was known by the BBC. Many people knew what Jimmy Savile was up to, and they kept quiet. And he carried on violating people, raping people, assaulting them, etc., etc. So Sarah Bennett is wrong. Now, going back to the Yasmin alibi piece, where alibi says, where is the Yasmin alibi? I'm going to find the Yasmin alibi piece saying that the Tories have broken Britain. Let me just, what page is 19? It's page 19. Going to get to page 19. So the Yasmin Alibi Brown, I'm giving this as the name on the records. I don't call her that. The right are asking why we are such a basket case. Let me tell them. So she's saying, let's read this bit in the end of the piece. During the 2010 election, David Cameron accused Labour of behaving as if choices have no consequences. Cameron promised to fix broken Britain. It wasn't broken beyond repair then. It is now. After listening to the unrepentant Truss this week and watching Laura Kuenssberg's documentary on Boris Johnson's egotistical and willful misgovernance, his Court of Mavericks, Dominic Cummings disrupting the unwritten constitution and causing chaos, I must conclude that Tory leaders from 2016 to now knowingly or inadvertently brought about the national disintegration we see today. Some prime ministers terrorized the civil service, others played fast and loose with public funds, dismissed rules of conduct, and created the country no, and treated the country like their private estate. Most Britons know this now. Will they? Can they? ever hold the destroyers to account? Well, this is not a hyperbole. This is not a high profile one, but an employee in the Inner London Education Authority in the 1980s. When she was picked up by the racists, especially in the crusade against Muslims, and they gave her a prominent spot in the New Statesman to have a go at Muslims protesting against Said and Rushdie. And that's when Yasmin Alibai was, if you like, discovered, invented. She's not really, and never has been, and never can be, a part of ordinary Muslim population in the United Kingdom. She never has been, she never can be. But what she does is that, unknown to most of the people who are not familiar with the community of Africans, Asians in this country, she misrepresents herself and she refers to herself as a Muslim. And those people who are not aware of the communities, the demography, she comes across as a Muslim, which she is not. When I say she is not a Muslim, I don't mean that she cannot technically call herself Muslim, which she can. But that's it. It is a technical reference. It is not a spiritual reference. It's not an ethical reference. It's not a reference on the basis of any faith that she has expressed as a Muslim on any issue. She is an enemy of the ethos that most Muslims subscribe to, and she is an enemy of the rights of the people who have been violated because they're Muslims in this country and by the empire. So when she was recruited by the New Statesman, her main purpose was to attack the Muslims. And for the best part of the 10 years after the end of the 1980s, Yasmin Alibai became the only Muslim sounding named individual used by the mainstream racist anti Muslim media in Britain that was coming across as being a Muslim but hostile to the Muslims. Hostile to a point where non Muslims would not be allowed to be hostile. And that was the trick. She was the Trojan horse betraying the fundamental universal human rights of the Muslims by disguising herself as a Muslim, but in fact acting as the most effective anti Muslim that could be found anywhere. And over the years, what she has found is that despite the fact that she is a traitor and she is a saboteur of the universal rights and claims of people who are Muslims, she herself has been treated by racists as if she is a Muslim. Irony, isn't it? So, whenever she has been treated as a Muslim by racists who, out of ignorance, have mistaken her as a Muslim, she has pretended to be wounded as a Muslim. So, what Cameron did when he arrived at the number 10 Downing Street in May 2010, the very first thing that Cameron did, was to focus on Muslims and the poor people, against them. He chose the Toynbee Hall in the commercial street in London, in Tower Hamlets, and he gave a spiel attacking the poor and attacking the Muslims. And then Cameron went to Nuremberg, the Nazis' place, and he created a symbolic update as a Führer, as the British Führer attacking the Muslims. Instead of the Führer attacking the Jews, he attacked the Muslims in Nuremberg. Now, the fact that Yasmin Ali Bai C has got a platform in the I newspaper must not conceal the fact that she is not aware of what actually Cameron's agenda was, and she could not care less. We are the only campaign that actually followed Cameron right from the beginning, and we have been campaigning against Cameron's agenda. We have been campaigning against Cameron being updated by Boris Johnson, the anti Muslim. And Yasmin Ali Bai has not dealt with any of those. So she's a phantom Muslim in the context, and she's a phantom critic of the conservatives. We shall be talking about all of those more in due course. This is the end of this edition, which is 1 hour 13 minutes at 9:14 GMT on Wednesday, the 20th of September 2023.